Hello. So we're back with another week of Percy Jackson. I hope if you're following along that it's going as well in your class as it is for us. They absolutely love Percy Jackson. It's the second time that we've been doing it, so different bunch of children, same reaction. Absolutely everybody is enthused by it. So we have a shorter week this week because of the bank holiday, so that leaves 4 classes. And the plan is that we have one class that's going to be stretched across 2 days, another lesson that's going to take place on Thursday, and then Friday will be an assessment. The assessment is important because it gives me feedback on how our lessons are going, because so much of this part of the instruction is comprehension based. I want to see what can the students do without their peers and without myself, and it gives me feedback on where we're going, what's going well, and what we could do more support with. Also gives me feedback on what levels of scaffolding I need to give, because I don't ever want to over scaffold it. I know these lessons are hard, they are meant to be hard. Children are meant to get support from the teacher, but it's always the minimum amount. So I want to just always know how we're going with these. With that said, let's dive into the first lesson of the week. So we start our week with a lesson that we're actually going to spread over 2 days because there's quite a lot in it. And in this one, we're not just looking at comprehension, we're actually really deep diving here into the word and sentence level. That's important too. As I've often said, we're at the far end of the rope here. So for those of you who are familiar with Scarborough's rope, we are not keeping things separate at this stage in students' education. We are intertwining this. So we are weaving so much into our instruction. Our objective is that we are looking at the unfamiliar words and phrases in Chapter 7 of Percy Jackson and the Lightning Thief. And it's a reminder, as always, that the children are coming with this chapter read. So they are reading it the previous night. And they are very good at doing this, mainly because I offer 2 options. They can listen to me read, and they also then have the book so they can read it. So there's a lot of accommodations made with that. Our direct instruction vocabulary, we're looking at summon, and you'll notice the way we have the word, the image, and the word, the image, the definition, and a sentence. And the definition should always be child-friendly. These are not words that we're doing once. We work with them throughout the week. But one of the words that I decided to include is oracle. Now, oracle normally wouldn't be one that I would choose, because oracle isn't a word that's going to give us a high yield. It's not something that I would expect the children to need quite frequently. However, we do have to think about the comprehension of the chapter, and it is impossible to comprehend the chapter without having the word oracle. So therefore it's one that we give, and we look at it in terms of ancient Greek. Then we move to looking, let's move us up here, looking at using context clues, because what we know is that not everything that the children read will be coupled with direct instruction, and we don't want it to be, because there is a cap, and quite a low cap, on the amount of words that we can explicitly teach to students. Morphology is a great way to help students broaden that vocabulary, but also so too is context clues. A lot of us understand words by being able to look at the context, and I know that sometimes people who are new to the science of reading have an understanding that is that you wouldn't look at context and that you wouldn't look at meaning. That's for decoding words. So you absolutely use context as your last protocol when you're decoding a word. However, it's one of your first protocols when you're trying to understand the meaning of the word. So I have an example here where, as you can see, I just move myself up here. I took a very short extract from the story. I have it there, and then I've given them 4 possible explanations for it, and they use the context clues to determine which of those is the most accurate. So moving on from there to our next slide, and here we're going to do the language dive. Now with the language dive, we are going to work very much with writing strategies that you may be familiar with from either the Writing Revolution, or you may be familiar with from the Syntax Project. Please let me know in the comments if you are familiar with them and you've been using any of these programs. They are absolute game changers for writing. I would say very often we are familiar with having our children write long. And then we are providing feedback where we're saying, well, that's not a very strong sentence, or shorten that sentence, or add more adjectives to it, or make it a more complex sentence. But if we don't explicitly teach those skills, so if we don't work at the sentence level to build that up, then we're asking our children to do a marathon without having done the training in it. So we have here a fragment of a sentence. And how do we know it's a fragment of a sentence? Because it does not give us the complete meaning. If we look back at Cabin 11, it does not make sense on its own. And a sentence should make sense on its own. So we have the context. Remember, this is one of the reasons why the children have read this before coming to the class. They have the context, they know what's happening, so they know what Cabin 11 refers to. They're all encouraged to use the text. At no stage am I looking saying you must learn this off by heart. So examples of ones that they could do is they could say that Percy and the other children of Hermes were back hanging out at Cabin 11. Or another example is back at Cabin 11, comma, Annabeth explained that Percy was the son of a god. So I want them to see that we can position this fragment at the beginning, middle, even at the end. And also that with this fragment, we can have multiple sentences. So that's one of the starts. Then we're looking at this sentence here. I thought about some of the kids I'd seen in Hermes' cabin, teenagers who look sullen and depressed, as if they're waiting for a call that would never come. So we are going to really hone in and use this as a mentor sentence. So we start by looking at what is the meaning. And of course, the meaning only comes from having read the chapter. But then I take parts of it. So they were waiting for that call to never come. I intentionally kept the whole sentence up at the top so that we can see quite a long sentence. So we are going to break it down in terms of complexity. Who is they? Highlight the as if. Now, what does this do in that sentence? So if we look back again, I thought about how some of the kids I'd seen in the Hermes cabin, teenagers who looked sullen and depressed, as if they were waiting for a call. So we're going to discuss that. Then we're going to look at the fact that what it's doing here, it's as if they were waiting for a call. They're not waiting for that call. This is a simile. So we go back and rewrite our similes, but then this is a lovely simile because it's not, I suppose, an old worn out simile. It's one that's really adding to the meaning of the sentence. It's a really subtle one. Why do you think the author used as if instead of like? So we'll go to that. And then the children have a choice. So I'm giving them options here. They do not have to complete both sentences. So we take that structure, the as if, and you can say Clarice stared at me angrily, as if, or Annabeth, what did she do? As if she had just looked into the eyes of a monster. So you can see in one of them, they get the start of the sentence completed. In the other one, they get the end and write the start. What's really important here is this is doing two things. First of all, I'm not saying, well, create any sentence you want using this frame. Instead, what I'm saying is use the understanding of the novel and where we are in the novel to do this. And what that does is that reduces the cognitive load on the students. So they're able to do this easier because they're not trying to come up with the idea. It also deepens the comprehension because even though this is a short write, we really have to think about our understanding of the story. This also means that we're noticing smaller details, and as we go on, we remember more. I'm sure that when you're reading a novel, you have students who are struggling to remember and recall that they're reading, but when they come back to the chapter or to the next section of the book, they struggle to remember what happened. So this is a great way to do that. And then we look at the meaning of depressed, the meaning of sullen. How are they different to each other? We want to look, why would you use both of them there? Why didn't he just use sad? So we're looking at author's craft. And then we look at the framework. How did this author create it? So the something noun looked something and something as if. So we've broken this complex sentence down. That might be all we get done on the first day of it. So on the second day, then we're going to move and we're going to look and understand the idea of what does it mean to be undetermined, both in terms of what does it mean, at a literal level, and what does it mean emotionally. Last week, if you remember, we looked at the hero's journey. We've kept this. It was such a wonderful document, but we've kept it and we're going back each time. So we're looking at where we are with Percy. So we're going to look at pages 93 to 95, and you'll notice I have it here. The children will have it in their copies as well. And on the second day, what they're going to do is they're going to choose one experience from 93 to 95, and they're going to match it then with a stage of the hero's journey. They should be, at this point, able to do a lot of that without explicit support from the teacher, but there's different levels of scaffolding depending on what it's needed. And that brings us then to the end of day 1 and day 2.